Howdy, Immortalium here, and today I'm reviewing Valkyria Chronicles. Now, what is Valkyria Chronicles? Well, let me give you the premise first. So, basically it's set, as far as I can tell, in an alternative history. There is the Second European War being fought between two nations, massive nations, the Western Federation and the Eastern Empire. Now, this war is being fought over Ragnite, essentially, a resource, a very valuable resource. And there is a small independent kingdom to the north of Europa called Gallia, which the Empire invades in order to get their access to Ragnite. Now, cut to the small border town of Brule, where we meet our lead character, Vulcan Gunther, the son of a heroic general who fought in the First European War. Vulcan isn't really interested in military, he loves nature, he loves studying plants and, researching bugs, etc., etc. But his town is invaded by the Empire and he's forced to flee, and he joins the militia in order to help drive out the Empire. And that's how the story begins. So, what did I think of the story overall? It's a very good story. The way the story is structured is we are flipping through the pages of a book written after the war was fought called On the Gallian Front, and you select your cutscenes and then it moves on to a battle, and it's very well done, this little book, but there is a little problem with it, and that is after the first the section of the story, the Brule part, the story feels slightly disjointed for a little while. Your militia is being sent, all over Gallia, fighting battles, and, goes from a desert to a forest, to mountains, and it feels a bit disjointed at the beginning, kind of like, is it just us being sent all over the place? Now, after a while, the story becomes much more serialized, and at that point, the story starts getting really good, dealing with various themes, the horror of war, the loss, racism, corruption of power, etc., etc. Even then, though, it's a little bit over the top at points, but that's fine for me. That's kind of to be expected from video games. It's hard to be subtle in video games, as I've learned. But so overall, the story is actually very good. I enjoyed it immensely. And it had a very satisfying ending, which is always a big plus in my book, because God knows the amount of stuff that doesn't have satisfying endings outnumbers the ones that do. So overall, I enjoyed the story a lot in Valkyria Chronicles. Now let's talk about the characters a bit. So basically, we have our lead character, Vulcan Gunther, which I already explained. You have the woman he met called Alicia Melchiot, and she is an orphan, but she's determined to help save Gallia, and, she's the potential love interest as well for Vulcan. And she's a very charming character as well. She's got a great way of bantering with Vulcan. She's great at, confronting others and, their issues in the war, to do with racism, etc., etc. She's a very charming character. And there's Isara, which is Vulcan's younger sister, although she's not related to him by blood. She's actually part of a race called the Darksons, who are discriminated against because they apparently tried to take all of Gallia in the past, well, all of Europe actually, and rule it. But they caused this massive explosion, which caused enormous damage, and they've been hated ever since. She's a sweet little character as well. She's very calm. She kind of deals with people who, are completely and utterly hateful of her. Very well, she just deals with them. She has her own dreams, to do with engineering. She's a nice character. And there's a variety of other characters we introduced to. Rosie, who was a singer before the war. Largo, I think he mentioned that he fought in the First European War. I'm not entirely sure about that. Now, there are a couple of, kind of weak characters here and there, which is to be expected from such a big cast. The main one was a character called General Damon, who, he was one of those characters one loves to hate, but he's a bit of a cliche, a bit of a weak character. He's kind of he's the guy in charge of the military, the actual military, and not the militia. And you know, he hates the militia and commoners and the plebs, and you know, he sends them to do, you know, the dirty work, and he takes the glory from them, and he's quite a moron. He doesn't really set up strategies, he just sends the troops in. And so he's a bit of a weak character. Like, I mean, it's pretty hard, like, even with his noble status, it's fairly hard to understand why he was given such a position. So, you know, there are some weak characters, but overall the cast of characters is great, and all the members of the squad have their charms, even if you don't know them too well. They all, you know, are animated differently, they all have different poses and walks, and they all have different, you know, phrases that they shout in battle, and you get to really know them and love them. So, characters are a plus. The gameplay now, the actual gameplay, the main feature of any game. This is a tactical RPG. What that means is that in battle, you have a number of command points determined by, you have a base number of them, and then for each commander you put into the battle, you gain an extra command point. What this command point actually allows you to do is that in your phase, you're able to, you know, use a command point on a single unit. This unit can range from being a scout who are vulnerable, but you know, are able to move very far and fast. There you have your stormtroopers, who are the kind of standard. They have machine guns. They're kind of your all-rounders. You know, they're strong. They take damage pretty well. You have your lancers, who are basically your anti-tank weapons. You have your engineers, who, you know, disarm mines and, you know, heal your equipment, like your tanks. And you have your snipers, which are kind of self-explanatory. They shoot people from a far distance away, but are like the most vulnerable of all your troops, and they move very slowly. And you have your tanks as well. And each time you use a command point on them, in that same phase, they're able to move, they only move a shorter distance. Like, they can't move as much as they did at the beginning. So that's an incentive to, you know, try to save your command points for another turn, or to use them on other units. Now, each time you give them a command point, they're able to do one action. This action can vary from, you know, firing their weapon to, you know, healing each other, etc., etc. Their movement doesn't count as an action, just to tell you. So they can move and then do an action. And when they fire, the game changes into this aiming reticule, where essentially you choose your target, and there's 2 points where you can shoot them. You can shoot them in the body, which is a larger target, but you cause less damage to them on each hit. And then you have their head, which is a small target, hard to hit, but if you hit it, you cause enormous damage. And there's various other things to consider. For example, you know, there's cover, where you're able to go behind cover and, you know, you take less damage. And there's lots of other factors to take into account. So it's a very fun battle system. The RPG elements come in. Basically, you train your troops in the headquarters of the book, and you upgrade their equipment in order to increase their stats. You're able to give squads different weapons in order to, you know, make them stronger. And when you train up your troops, they gain access to these things called potentials. And what these potentials are is that they potentially activate, and they, you know, grant your unit an ability. So, for example, if it's maybe something like resist crossfire, what that'll mean is that your troop you have activated, will take less damage as they run through gunfire. So it's a very fun battle system overall. If I had to criticize something in particular, it would be the AI. The AI is kind of not good. There are various opportunities I saw that they could have taken in order to actually defeat me, but they act kind of stupid sometimes. They pick a unit of theirs and they just charge them into the middle of my troops. My troops gun them down like almost instantly. Or, you know, for example, there's a limit on their troops, basically preventing the AI from, using the same unit more than twice in a phase. with certain exceptions. So the AI is kind of not great, but it's still fun. I mean, the fact is, they kind of make up for that by the fact that you are faced with overwhelming odds. So if the AI was actually quite competent, it would be almost impossible. But I do think that maybe they could have, reworked it a bit, maybe made it less overwhelming, and maybe improved the AI a bit, and it would have just flowed a bit better. I don't know. So that's how the gameplay works, essentially. It's a very addictive system. You're also able to do this thing called skirmishes, where basically they're unlocked, and these are kind of like side missions, side battles that you can do. And you can do them as much as you want, unlike the campaign battles, and you can gain experience and money, and use that for training your troops or for researching new weapons and all that. So that's also a very good system. And you're able to select your difficulty for those skirmishes, so easy and normal. And you unlock hard once you complete the game. Now, one thing I was dreading when I was playing, when I heard about this game and I wanted to play it, but I heard that you could lose your troops. They can die on you. And I feared a system kind of like Fire Emblem, where if your troop ever gets killed, they're gone, unless they're a story-specific character, and in that case, you're unable to use them again. But actually, it's much more lightweight than that. Basically, if one of your troops gets taken down, you have 3 turns to send another troop over and rescue them, and they will die if you don't get to them after 3 turns, or if the enemy troops make contact with them. But because the AI isn't that great, they kind of, unless they happen to be in the path of the enemy won't, specifically aim for them once they've taken them down. And you're able to call the troops back in next turn once they, the medics have worked on them. And if a story-specific character, gets, defeated in battle, you can actually bring them in the next battle. They're not gone for the rest of the game. So it's a much more forgiving system than Fire Emblem, which I was pleased at. And I think I'll end off this review with talking about the voice acting. In this game, you have access to the Japanese as well as the English. I played this in the English, and all the performances are very good. You have a lot of the standard anime voice actors, mostly the ones that are kind of around, is it New York or LA or somewhere? I can't remember where. So not many Funimation people. More like, like the Bandai Viz Media people, like Colin O'Shaughnessy and Dave Wittenberg, those kind of actors, and they all give very good performances. One thing I have to commend, though, is that the lip syncing was very good. There's nothing more annoying, I think, in a Japanese game than, the characters are giving great voices, and yet, the characters are like flapping their mouths, when no dialogue's going on, or, they're like have their mouth closed while dialogue is going on. It's really annoying, and I've seen that in Street Fighter. I've seen that in the Naruto games. But the lip syncing was actually really good in this, so I was very pleased with that. So overall, I really enjoyed this game. I would highly recommend that you buy it if you're into like tactical RPGs and strong storytelling, etc., etc. It is a very good game. So I give it an 8.5 out of 10. It's got its flaws. It's not a perfect game. But overall, it's easily recommendable. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and bye-bye.